Writer's Echo here. I have a fantastic book I want to discuss with you today, and it is Of Fish and Game and Butterflies by Pierre Bergounioux. It was brought to my attention by an Algerian friend of mine discussing some of my favorite French writers like Michel Bitor, Jacques Ribot, Pierre Sange, and Pascal Quignard. And when he was to mention his top two, there were actually names I had not heard of. He mentions Pierre Michon, who has, thankfully, a lot of things translated, and maybe best of them all is Pierre Bergounioux. He suspected that he wasn't translated at all, but to our surprise, we found that this little collection of 3 short novellas was released in earlier this year, 2022, French publisher. So I purchased and read this book, and I was very impressed. It has some beautiful writing, and it is very interesting. I want to talk a little bit about Bergounioux, and I want to plead with my friends and fellow content creators to read and talk about this book. I would really like for anyone who sees this video to email any publisher that are a likely candidate for publishing this sort of writer, and ask and to show interest in Pierre Bergounioux. From what I gather, Pierre grew up in the southwest of France, and he is very concerned with his home region. In the introduction, the translator says that he was struck at a tender age by the fact that the books he was borrowing at the municipal library were all about places and people that had nothing to do with the ones surrounding and baffling him. They were left unexplained, ignored by literature, history, philosophy, and sociology. Now, he saw glimpses of what he sought when he read William Faulkner, which was one of his biggest influences. Other influences are Homer, Marcel Proust, Franz Kafka, and Claude Simon. I asked my Algerian friend how well known Pierre is in France, and he said that anyone with any interest in literature would know the name. And when you look at the French Wikipedia page, you notice quickly that he is a prolific writer and that he has won a lot of awards. And you're a bit puzzled as to why he's not well known in the English-speaking world. From what I have gathered from dictionaries and Wikipedia entries, he wrote many short novels, and some say that you could see these as chapters of an extensive autobiography, where he also wants to show how the life in the French countryside in our time is in the process of being transformed and disintegrating. He's critical of the modern urban lifestyle, but he stops short of becoming nostalgic. The countryside is challenging and relentless, but marked by certain fundamental relationship which today seem to be under threat. So there's a lot of tragedy involved in his stories. His works are often like philosophical essays. He uses this perceived loss of rurality as an excuse to meditate on modernity and what he perceives as lost. But this wouldn't be enough to interest me if it also wasn't for the fact that he writes beautifully. He is a very interesting prose stylist, and some of the imagery he uses is also excellent. So I want to read a couple of sections before repeating my plea of trying to get the world interested in him. Oh, one last autobiographical tidbit before we jump into it. Pierre studied language and literature, and in 1979 he defended a doctoral thesis under the supervision of Roland Barthes. And his PhD was entitled Flaubert, and the other, intersubjective literary and dialectical communication. So that sounds interesting. Anyways, also shout out to Claude Newman for his excellent translation and for caring so much about this author. I hate fish. There exists a word for designating the movement that leads us to the pursuit of what we know very well we do not like, though. One speaks of fatality. Ancient medicine relates the passions of the soul to the entire universe. We play our part, as often poorly as well, at the intersection of two registers, each of them quadruple, of matter, the inner one, the humors, and the one that swirls outside. Here the mechanics of primitive fluids, the convection of vital liquors, yellow bile and phlegm, blood and black bile. There, the eternal conflict of water and fire, of air and earth, the tumultuous realm of the elements. Now, I mostly wanted to add this part to just show a glimpse of the narrator's mind, and that this isn't your typical rural bucolic. Aside from the Swedish scent they give off, except for the grayling which exhales, as its erudite name, Thymulus, suggests, a fleeting whiff of thyme. And the wild trout, fario, which smells of water cold and pure, that is to say, of nothing at all. Fish also repel by the sudden alteration which accompanies their passing into the air. Another feature, probably, of the conflict opposing, through various proxies, the powers of the origin. In water, it's slightly differentiated water, faster fleeing, a denser silver in the silvery powdering of the current, very little gold for a very short time, that betrays the trout, its specks of mica, wisps of algae, gravel inscribed within an ellipse. That's what fish are, as long as they stay in their element and we in ours, and that we look akin, perhaps, in their eyes, to something entirely different, to shadows, to trees, to the changing contour of the clouds, to the passing of the wind. If we were simply ourselves, without useless foreign passions, the children of earth born, according to the learned ones, from humus, the fish would remain in the water, and there would be little less disorder in the universe. But agents or victims, it doesn't matter, of an intempestive fire or a dream, we sometimes are dying to remove them from their element. I never approached in cold blood a source, a puddle, a creek. The least movement in the water stirs my emotions. My father, who is sleeping off his sorrow with me, raises his eyes, livens up. Grandpa leaves the sun-splashed esplanades, where towers his tall figure, approaches, leans over. And others with them, and that I didn't get to meet, but whom they remember, and whom it is of no importance that I don't even know they lived. They did. They shared that taste. It passed into the blood with the stream of bile and vapors of the dream, whose immemorial course runs through us for a moment. Another section I found captivating. It all starts with the sudden tear of the surface, when it has bitten and it refuses to draw the consequences, to come to us on the other side. It makes for a whole story rhythmed by approaches and flights, punctuated by muted flickers and sparkling glows, by reluctances, by surrenders. Sometimes it's cut short when the fish, if it is one, if it exists before materializing in the air, breaks the line or gets rid of the feather flake one had stuck in its mouth. But sometimes it comes to fruition and the evil spell immediately starts to take hold. Quantity of movement one had harnessed dissipates. Then it's the native riches, the glow of fine metal, the fires that die out. There remains but whitish flesh, dreary cadavers, in which rise the dark mores of corruption, and which already smells. I'm not sure to be very cheerful or proud when I bring back these faded, disenchanted, unrecognizable vestiges as night falls. Each time, almost, that it chases me towards the inhabited places where the lamps are being lit, I think that it's useless and disappointing, that it's over. I won't be caught any more at the passing water's edge in time irreparable. As a matter of fact, it's 2 or 3 times that I need to wash my hands. The slightest smell of fish turned my stomach then. Impossible to absorb food that contains water or is soaked in it. Salad, fruits, tomatoes. And so he discusses this compulsion of his to fish, and he gives us context of learning how to fish, of meeting old fishermen, of trying to get his father's approval as his father is aging and fishing with him. And it's filled with really wonderful writing, and it's always intelligent and interesting. These examples of prose and these readings and this discussion has only dealt with the first novella in the book, The Line. And there are 2 more which I won't touch upon, and in hopes of other content creators and better analytical minds taking to Pierre Bergounioux. But I will conclude with that he plays with a wide register. It should be obvious that he's very intelligent and he has very interesting observations to make, but he also does well with emotional subjects and shows sort of budding personalities and family issues. And yeah, I think that he is a wonderful writer, and I feel very deprived of not being able to read more of his work. So again, any one of you buying his work would mean a lot to me. If you go on Amazon, there's a typo. It's a fish and game and butterflies. But for us Europeans, it's probably easier to find it directly from the French publisher. Thank you so much for watching, and I hope you're intrigued by Pierre Bergounioux.